Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Juan. He's the CEO of Boopos. Boopos helps talented buyers acquire businesses and brokers close their sale mandates by committing flexible financing for buying e-commerce and software as a service businesses. Join us today as we discuss why create Boopos. What do they look for as funding criteria and what are the key factors it takes to get an acquisition of an e-commerce or software as a service company funded? Welcome to the show, Juan, man. It's great to have you here today. Where I always like to start is kind of getting people to know you, know where you're from, what you're up to, and stuff. Can you tell us a little bit, like, kind of your origin story? How did you get into mergers and acquisitions and stuff? And then we're going to jump right into Boopos. But first, let's just talk a little bit about kind of what drew you to create something like this. What is your background?
Makes sense. I mean, I like to say that I'm a finance guy, but at the same time, I'm a tech guy. I studied engineering, and I remember that my final degree project was an automated trading system. So we looked at public companies, we looked at number of metrics, and we had a system that invested automatically in these companies. So I've always had this idea of using data for making investment decisions. And then over time, then fresh from school, I joined an investment bank. I joined Merrill Lynch. I spent a couple of years there. Then I joined a local private equity firm. And throughout all that time, I always had this feeling that there was a factor or a level of randomness in the way people access financing or get invested in their companies. And I always wondered why. Like it could be maybe you were not inspired on that investor meeting, or maybe you didn't have the right connections at the right time, or maybe your business was pretty good, but then something happened and you didn't get access to that financing. And I felt it was somehow unfair. So I always had that in the back of my mind. Then I joined a company called Cabify. So Cabify is like Uber for Spain and Latin America. I was the CFO there for like 8 years. And during that time, I got to raise like 500 million US dollars in funding for the company. And again, several times I had the experience of being about to close a funding round, and then something popped up in the last minute, and then it didn't happen. And again, this kind of also inspired me to get this. I mean, there was something to be done with this factor of randomness in getting financing.
Why create a solution to that? What's the scope of it? I mean, I'm sure you guys did some research on like what's the scale and scope behind e-commerce and software as a solution business for sale out there today.
Makes sense. I mean, in general, you said it right. SBA is looking for assets or is looking for personal guarantees. In many instances, we've seen e-commerce businesses and SaaS businesses qualify for SBA, but then you need to use. I mean, you need to give personal guarantees. So that's, let's say that you're borrowing $1 million, and then the business doesn't go well for whatever reason, then you'll end up paying that debt for life with your own assets. So I think that basically entrepreneurs, they take a lot of risk. They take low salaries for a long time. They just move from corporate careers or whatever they're doing, where they could earn a lot of money and have like a very predictable type of career, and they're betting a lot. So I guess that having this personal guarantee type of term in their financing is just not bearable. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that in many cases, they just don't qualify for SBA at all because they don't have the assets, because they don't have the track record. We've seen some SBA lenders using cash flows rather than assets for financing, but still they're not comfortable with online businesses because they don't understand it.
I noticed earlier you said something about you protect yourself by making sure there's not a significant decline in the business. So is there a quarterly reporting? Do you guys have access to my financials on a quarterly basis, a monthly basis, or what does that look like?
So before closing the deal, or basically at closing, you will have to connect your merchant accounts. So we will have
Hmm.
access to revenues. Actually, we're a revenue-based lender, so we will charge a percentage of revenues.
Hmm.
So we will track revenues every month. That's one thing. And then we will also ask for a connection to the bank account, so we can take a look at all the statements and movements of the bank account. So with those two things, that's good enough in terms of reporting, etc. You wouldn't need to worry about sending us financials every time. That's good information. What we also ask is for the annual tax return, and if there's an audit, then audited financial statements. Usually, at this size of business, there's no audit, but yeah, that's something else that we need.
What do you guys see as makes a good e-commerce store?
First of all, I guess that there has to be a match between the experience of the buyer and the e-commerce store itself. For example, we recently lent to a woman who was running a content site related to motherhood and children, etc., and she was planning to buy a stroller and pushchair e-commerce store. So it made a lot of sense because she was going to direct traffic from her content site to the e-commerce store, and she had experience in that segment. So I guess that, and that's something that future business owners and buyers usually tend to do very well. Like they like to focus on businesses they can manage, and then they can you know take to the next level. From our perspective, we like to partner with that type of people and make sure that there's a match between the business and the buyer. And from the business standalone, so what does a good e-commerce look like? Usually they have a good SEO positioning, they have a good authority in terms of the things that they're selling and the way you would get to it organically. They usually have recurring clients, and it depends on the product a little bit. It could happen or it could not. But if you connect to the Shopify account and you see that there's a lot of recurring sales, then that means that the customer base is loyal, and then will probably keep on buying products from the same store.
So you do funding for the acquisition of the company, you do funding for growth. What are the other? Is that the two main things you focus on, or is there other stuff you?
Those are the two main things we focus on, and I would say that our core product and our focus is acquisition financing. So, but if you're buying like an Amazon or an e-commerce store, in many instances you will require follow-on financing because you grow in the company, you need to buy inventory. So it makes sense for us to structure like a follow-on growth loan. Sometimes we have also seen people who are actively looking to buy businesses, and they already own a business, so they need a growth loan for that business while they seek to acquire more businesses. So again, in that situation, it also makes sense to provide a growth loan. But yeah, the core and our strategy is all kind of revolving towards or revolving around lending for acquisitions.
Are there any other things that you do for these individuals? It looks like there's a play to, as you're pre-approving these. Does your algorithm, or does your team actually identify areas where, hey, we've got another one out there. There's another one available that would really help you grow. It's right in your target space. Do you encourage the purchase of other like similar businesses to help these guys grow?
That's something that we do. Yeah, that's something that we do. We're implementing an algorithm to do it automatically, but right now it's our team just looking at businesses that come our way, and we have a comprehensive database where we can see the interests of each of our clients, and we're using that data for sending businesses that way. Because I mean, I would say that 90% of the people we work with are planning to buy. They're not aggregators. They just don't want to aggressively buy tens of businesses, but they like to be business owners, and they are definitely motivated to own two, maybe three related businesses, our portfolio of maybe up to five, and so that's why actually we get very good feedback of the product, so it makes sense for us to push businesses that way.